In the ever-changing world of digital marketing, it's paramount that you are keeping up with trends, staying ahead of the game, and keeping in the good books with the likes of our friends over at Google. In this podcast, we discuss the realities behind paid marketing, some common misconceptions, also known as managing client expectations, and how to design a strategy that moves the needle heading into the new year. Enjoy the show. John, welcome to the Sideshow podcast.
Matt, thanks so much for having me.
All the way from Texas?
Yes, sir. Typically sunny Texas, having a dark and gloomy day today.
Yeehaw. Mate, welcome. We're having a chat today about some strategies on how we can stay in the good books of our friends over there at Google in an ever-changing, fast-moving landscape. Forever frustrating landscape, I should add. So, mate, thanks for joining us. And you're from StubGroup.com. I'll put some links and everything to John in the show notes for you guys out there that want to get hold of John. So, mate, appreciate reaching out. Appreciate your time this morning or this afternoon.
Absolutely. Looking forward to chatting.
It's a topic that, in truth, I should probably riff more on. You know, it's such a fast changing landscape, and there's so many things that are ever evolving. I'm hoping in this episode we can dispel a few myths and maybe address a few apprehensions or concerns, and maybe talk about a few of the problems that we each experience in the paid marketing space, especially in relation to managing expectations and helping clients understand the reality behind what a paid campaign actually, the time it takes to get these things up and running, and the time you need for the algorithms to learn before you start going in and changing all this stuff. You can't make. I mean, you would probably no doubt have similar experiences, but we had a client recently who cancelled his campaign after 3 weeks 13 days because the phone wasn't ringing, and we were like, "I told you give it a couple of months."
You're just getting started.
We literally just turned it on.
Yep.
No, and then we had another client who went and pulled all of his keywords out of it. Went into micromanage his own campaign and pulled all of his keywords out of his campaign, and literally overnight just went bang, just crashed. The phone was ringing and it stopped, obviously, and he's like, "Your stuff isn't working." We're like, "Mate." So yeah, it'd be good to sort of talk a little bit into some of the deeper dynamics and help people understand, because I think there's a bit of a apprehension of, well, you just put the money down and tomorrow the phone rings, and like that can be the case, but it's you've got to do things in the right order, and you've got to give it time like anything.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like, to describe it, it's a combination of science and art, and it's not as straightforward as just throw the keyword in there and things happen. But you have to have the right keyword, you have to have the right approach in there, and
sure,
get the right combo.
Yeah, and having the right keywords and stuff in there, like they're not always obvious either. Like it's some like the whole point behind optimization is learning and adding keywords in, pulling keywords out so that the algorithms learn, the campaigns perform better, applying negative keywords, like all these things which people are like, oh, what? So I had many years ago, we were running actually this was when I was in the plumbing game. I was in the pipe relining game, and we had one service there, which was patch repair. And essentially it's where you repair a section of pipe with like a liner. And it's, they call it putting a patch in, right? And anyway, we had in our Google ad campaign patch repair. And of course, we started getting all these hits, and it was for old ladies that were looking on, how to patch the clothing and things like this. So we actually had to put one of our main products as a negative keyword, so the campaign didn't. So we weren't getting clicked out on stuff that was irrelevant. The little things are not always obvious, But
exactly.
But even when you're in the trenches for these things, excuse that pun, that sometimes that's probably sometimes the worst place to be, because you're so close to it, you can't actually see it for what it is,
Yeah, that's why you've got to let that data dictate what's going on. And I'm sure you have these conversations with your clients all the time. We do as well, which is, look, there's a hypothesis that we might test based upon our gut, based upon the client saying, hey, I think this does well or that does well. But then we've got to have
The
a
data talk.
process in place to measure the results, understand the results. Patrick Red, that's a great example of, okay, well, there could be two different things. It could be maybe the website's not converting well for that search term. So let's look at the website and figure out, are these actually people looking for what you do and the website doesn't have the right messaging or there's a problem? Or is it this completely other different type of search intent that happens to match up, semantically with what you're
Yeah.
targeting? And
Yeah, and that was definitely
yep.
the case. Like there was, if you went and looked for the search volume, there was enough search volume, but it was all for a completely different vertical.
Yep.
It was
Well,
pretty funny.
we'll experience that type of thing a lot too. When we've got clients, sometimes we'll have a client who, I think great example, we had a client who did floor coating, but they did commercial floor coating. So they wanted customers who were businesses who needed to hire them for commercial floor coating, or maybe concrete or whatever. But then there's so many residential people looking for buy some epoxy for their garage floor or something, and using the exact same terms. You got to kind of figure out, okay, can we profitably weed out the residential traffic to get the actual desired commercial traffic, or do we have to go about this in a different way because there's just so much of that traffic that it's not cost
And I,
effective for us.
and I think that's the power of having a strategy that incorporates both the paid strategy and then an organic strategy, because you can leverage a lot of that organic traffic through means that aren't going to cost you on the clicks, So
Exactly. Yeah, it does harm if you get old ladies who are clicking on patch repair if those are free
yeah,
clicks, and so you
yeah,
might optimize towards that on the organic side, whereas you realize on the paid side, it's not profitable for you.
yeah. It's an interesting. I mean, the last year especially, since seen quite a lot of changes with Google's algorithms in the space of, the evolving language and the way that the algorithms are just getting smarter and smarter, and there's less intent based on the specific keywords. Like they can kind of understand the general gist of conversation. And I'm curious to see what your thoughts are, because we've sort of run tests both sides of the equations with having content that is written purely for the reader, with a keyword focus, but purely for the reader. And then we've had content that we've written for what traditionally would have been, you know, leveraging the search engines, metrics by having keywords in the right place and affiliate and associated keywords and all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
And the I still feel like it's leaning at the moment towards what it was, as opposed to what they like to suggest you should be doing, which is really just create content purely for the reader.
Mm.
But I know this changes, so I don't know when the blade's going to chop on it.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm seeing Google pushing more and more towards, especially on the paid side of things, is Google looking at things as more from an audience perspective as opposed to even a search intent perspective. You see this especially with things like Performance Max campaigns that have been rolling out, where
Yeah,
Google's like, look, you can't even choose the keywords you're targeting. You tell us, Google, who you want and what audience they're in, and you add signals, and then Google leverages everything they know about, hey, I just did 5 searches for a plumber and then watched a YouTube video about fixing a pipe, and then so forth and so on. And now Google thinks I'm the right person to see an ad across whatever Google property I'm on. And that's, sometimes it works well, sometimes not. It's, I think, still,
I've not seen it
yeah.
work well yet for us.
On the lead gen side, largely we have not seen it work well either. On e-commerce, we're seeing really good results.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes
Most
sense.
of our e-commerce clients, where they're actually selling something through their website, that's working really well. For local businesses, people in the trades, Performance Max is definitely much more hit or miss, and
A slippery slope to bankruptcy.
it can be lots of. Sometimes we'll see lots of leads come through, but they're complete spam. We've seen
Oh yeah,
that before, where it's like,
yeah.
oh, hey, we got 100 leads for $1 a lead. Something's wrong here, and then you look through the email addresses and realize, yeah, this is not what we want. So there's still there's still, I think, a lot of room on the lead gen side. And our team at Google has even told us that at times, like, hey, yeah, maybe don't test it quite yet because the
Oh, is that
system's
right?
still learning at times. Depends who you get and how honest they're being that day.
Yeah, sure. They probably just use it. They probably just want to use us to improve the algorithm.
Exactly.
I mean, there's a lot of, there is a lot of, I suppose, evolution within Google alone, and with that comes a lot of room for error, lots of like compliance related issues. I know when we spoke on the phone the other day, we were talking about how to remain compliant with our friends over at Google and that kind of stuff. So it'd be good to, get your take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we do a lot at StubGroup is actually working with businesses who've either encountered issues or don't want to encounter issues when it comes to complying with Google's policies. And there's a lot of people out there, a lot of advertisers in Google who know generally, oh, Google's got things you can and can't do, but they don't realize how paranoid Google can be at times at enforcing their policies and how broad ranging their policies can be, and at what types of things can accidentally trigger Google. So, for example, we'll often have businesses reach out to us who create a new ad account for some reason. Maybe they were moving from one agency to another agency, and rather than taking their old account with them, they had the new agency create one or created one on their behalf, and suddenly they're flagged for something like suspicious payments behavior, something Google will flag you for a lot. And they're like, we haven't even paid money in this new account. How can it be suspicious payments? They haven't taken our money yet. But it's because Google has these things in place, and often if they see a new account pop up with similar payment method or domain or things, they'll flag that many times and suspend that. And then it's a real fun process of getting that unsuspended. It's not as easy as you might think. So that's something that we see happen a lot. And then we see people making all kinds of different honest mistakes. One thing we see happen oftentimes is maybe someone goes through a website change and they put redirects on their URLs. So maybe they have either a different domain or different pages or something, and they don't realize that it actually violates Google's policies to have a redirect on the URL to which you send traffic from an ad. And Google suspends you for circumventing because they say, hey, you've got a redirect. And Line's like, we didn't know. We weren't trying to do anything weird. It's just our SEO team told us to do it or something like that. Those are just two examples, but that happens more than you might expect. I think last year Google reported they suspended 5 million advertiser accounts, which is a lot of people who can no longer serve ads on Google. And a lot of them are bad actors, but a lot of them are legit advertisers who just trying to spend money with Google.
I suppose it's like it's good that they do have those security blankets in place, across the board, but it's also a frustrating scenario when if you don't know that you've
yeah, no, it's really, I mean, there's so many people who are trying to scam you through Google Ads. They have to have those policies in place. They have to have ways to weed the bad actors out. Absolutely. Sure. And I'm grateful that they do. But then you've got those situations where those legitimate advertisers get caught up in that, and then fortunately, there's not a good process in place to prove your innocence. It's very much a kind of you're guilty until proven innocent, and we're not going to give you a lawyer, and we also aren't going to really tell you the exact law book that we're using to decide whether or not you are innocent or guilty. And so we kind of end up being that lawyer sometimes and figuring out, okay, what's the law here, and what's actually the problem, and how do we fix that?
Yeah, it's incredible that you've got these. I mean, like at Google, Facebook, people that spend, well, and maybe this is the problem, like you're out there spending, 5, 10, 50 grand a month on Google ads or on Facebook, and they couldn't be less interested. Like they're after businesses that are spending millions a month, and I question, I mean, we've been in Facebook jail for months now. Can't get out, no support. And like, so, it's the most frustrating thing in the world. We can't run ads for our podcast and all that kind of stuff. But I wonder if, at a high level, if we were, spending $2 million a month, if we would get supported,
It's one of those things where sometimes yes and sometimes no. I mean, it's a good example. We're just working with a client. They spent, they averaged about $2 million a month the first 6 months of 2022. And then they hit this situation where every single ad that they create is disapproved. So it's not that their account is quote unquote suspended, but it's every ad they create is disapproved for like clickbait or misleading ad design or something. And, we've worked with them, still kind of thinking through things with them, but they've scoured everything, every landing page, every ad, everything is completely above board, perfect, vanilla, blah, blah, blah. And yet every time they create something new, it's flagged. And they've talked with people at Google and they're like, yeah, don't really know what to do about this. Kind of is what it is. So sometimes it doesn't matter how much money you're spending. It's just Google does what Google does.
It's amazing, isn't it? When you think you've got this platform that, I mean, if people are spending money on it, you'd want to support it, right?
You would think so.
So what's your take on the whole, I mean, probably without going down the whole Cambridge Analytica sort of side of things, but the whole data collection, aspect of Google Ads and the legalities behind, all of that. I'd love to get a bit of a take on that, especially from someone over in the US.
Yeah, it's a very hot topic for sure. It's one of those things where I think Google, they've probably gotten more of a pass than Facebook while probably doing similar things in terms of many of the types of data that they collect. Facebook has taken lots of falls, and Facebook has done lots of shady things. I'm not standing up on behalf of Facebook, but yeah, Google collects a lot of data, and they're kind of in this place right now where they're trying to stay ahead of regulation and be viewed as privacy centric while not losing their ad business. And so you see things like GA4, which they're coming out with, or they have come out with, to replace their previous universal analytics product, which is this complete redesign of how you track how people get to your website and how they engage with your website. In theory, it's more privacy oriented. It's built for a world in which cookies don't exist. It's also kind of a nightmare to use, frankly, and kind of a nightmare to set up from our experience. So still navigating those realities. But I think the way I look at it is Google is trying to kind of ride this or figure out this balance between saying, hey, we care about your privacy, we protect your data, you can opt out of things, etc., while also using all kinds of first-party data and third-party data that advertisers can provide back to it to inform those campaigns, and saying, hey, your Performance Max campaigns, they need your customer lists uploaded in order to do well. They need, your import to data from GA4 or Universal Analytics imported into your account. And so they're trying to get the best of both worlds. And I don't know where things will end up, but it's a fun ride to watch.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I think the days of privacy are long gone. I don't think there's any coming back.
I agree with that. If you're online, if you're using digital devices, you got a smartphone, then people know where you are, what you're doing, what you're doing.
Oh, just the tracking through IP addresses and that kind of stuff is just insane. So anyway, so I mean, should we talk a little bit to what about some of the things around call tracking and that kind of stuff? I know a lot of we always try and put call tracking phone numbers on Google ad campaigns, for example. So essentially, if somebody clicks on an ad or they call that number that they see within that ad, then we can track that as a win through our CRM, and we know that the winners come through that. So, what's your take on the whole call tracking, call recording, and that kind of thing?
I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's something that I'm very passionate about and something we spend a lot of time at StubGroup doing and thinking about, especially for businesses like your audience in the trades who are getting phone calls, and every phone call, it's vital that where does it come from and how was it handled. Every call is such a big opportunity. If you don't have a way to track those calls and record those calls, from my perspective, you're at a real loss, because you can't do a couple things. You can't say, these are my profitable campaigns, these are my unprofitable campaigns. You don't know where are those calls coming from. And so if your company, Matt, is managing campaigns for a client and you don't know where the calls are coming from, well, how can you spend their money effectively? How can you say, this keyword, this patch repair word is or isn't working, because you don't know if it's working. So that's really important. And then also the recording aspect is something that we leverage heavily for our clients, because we'll have a team who actually listens to those calls and can provide feedback to a client. We've had so many examples. We've had clients come to us and they'll be like, hey, last month was terrible. We didn't get any calls, no business. You guys are doing a terrible job. And so we show them their call tracking count. Like, well, you're using an answering service and they're only answering like 1 out of every 5 calls. And when they answer, they're not, they're doing a terrible job of customer service and they don't really know what they're selling. So the problem isn't the calls aren't coming in. The problem is you got to, handle those calls in a different way and you're leaving all this business on the table. Yeah. So that's vital. It's vital for them to understand and then be able to get on the ball, because otherwise they're just going to kind of surf from agency to agency, be like, oh, well, it's the agency's fault we're not getting calls, and they'll go out of business because they're not getting calls.
Yeah, that's what happens. And it's a funny conversation actually when you bring up the topic of recording the calls, because some of the clients are like, that's a great idea. I'd love to hear how that's handled. And some of them are like, no, you don't do that. I'm fine with the calls. And you're like, yeah, no, you're the one that we do need to record because exactly. I've been at the pub with you and I've heard you pick your phone up when it rings and go, yeah, what? So, yeah.
Totally.
It's an interesting dynamic because it kind of flips a lot of the responsibility back on, the individuals that are receiving the calls.
Yeah, I think a lot of businesses kind of view marketing or Google Ads as a magic button that you can just press it and life will be good. All the business will come in. And a lot just don't realize, look, that works to a certain extent, but you have to have the right processes and systems and messaging and customer service in place to actually leverage the business coming in and make it profitable. And that call tracking side of things really can hold their feet to a fire in a good way. And also it gives them ammo. Like, hey, if we're not driving calls, we can't say, oh, your phone is probably ringing. We're like, no, you're not getting called. We know. So there's a problem here. Let's figure out, how to fix it. And we don't have to wonder if it's just wrong information on their end. We know it's truly a performance issue that we need to solve.
It's interesting as well. One of the things that we see a lot is, people, they might come to us and they'll say, hey, we want to run ads for Plumber Sydney or something like that. You go, okay, well, tell me a little bit about the business. Oh, there's 2 of us at the moment, and we live over in this part of the city, and they don't really understand the dynamic of what you need from the perspective of a business in order to be able to service certain keywords competitively. And I think people need to understand it's very, very often it's not the case where you can just show up and say, hey, we want to be ranked number 1, number 2 for this keyword, in the city that we live in, because you just haven't got the business structure in place. And your worst nightmare is going to be if you did rank for those positions, because you have no way of servicing them.
Right. The amount of volume that can come in there. And a lot of people don't understand just how expensive it is, how much other people are spending on it. And you've got to that frequency is an important part of things, especially in the local trades, where if you only have enough budget to show up, once every now and then when someone is searching, and you're competing against someone who is consistently appearing when someone searches, even if they're not clicking on that ad, they're getting that name in their mind. Company ABC. Oh, I've seen them, their name 5 times when I searched, and now that I'm ready for a plumber and looking for one, oh great. I've seen their name, I'll click on their ad now and we're off to the races. Whereas you've got those ones that are spending $1,000 a month, and they pop up every now and then. They might still get some clicks, but subliminally, even their brand name has nowhere near the credibility that the guys who are spending $100,000 a month have been able to build up through their spend.
Yeah, and that's often the case. When we're dealing with businesses that they'll come to us and they'll ask they want to compete on these terms or whatever it is, or we do everything. We can service the whole area and we do everything. And you're like, you can't. And I'll tell you why. Because this guy here, I know for a fact, is spending $250,000 a month on ads for the same term, and he can service it. So it's a bit of a polarizing conversation when you can kind of help them, understand. But you know what? Also, that's where some of the great opportunities lie for smaller businesses. It's in narrowing down those campaigns so that you don't have to compete against these huge companies that are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can compete, in your own little space there and gradually grow it bit by bit if you need to.
Exactly. Figuring out, where's that that little niche that is kind of ignored or not served well by the big boys because they've got so much business and stuff going on that they're, busy all the time. And then you figure out, oh, hey, you know what? We're really good at this type of plumbing or this particular area or commercial versus residential or whatever. And then you make that the focus of the ads and the service. And like you said, you build from there.
Yeah. And I think there's an evolution that's coming. I mean, there is already an evolution that's coming. I mean, I know over in North America this year, you guys got the local ad service feature, which is coming out in Australia, so which essentially is a spin-off what was Google My Business, basically adding a paid layer to that, which is a great idea because I mean, similar to much of the things we've been talking about at Facebook and Google, like anything that's free they don't support. So Google My Business has been an absolute nightmare trying to support that. Yep. But putting a paid layer over the top of that is useful. And most of the service-based businesses, that's enough,
Yeah, we've seen really good results from those local service ads for a lot of our clients who have been leveraging those. And I mean, there's some really cool things. One thing we love about it is the cost per lead model. So you are paying for a lead. Of course, there's going to be different types of leads, different quality, but as opposed to, hey, they clicked my ad, hopefully they convert. There's only so much we can do to control that. Well, you're paying per call with local service ads, and you're ranking higher than everything else on the page when those ads show, because that's what Google shows first. And so a lot of people currently, until Google changed it again, as of maybe I might be dating this episode, but those will show up, and then you've got that Google guaranteed logo right there in your ad, which gives a lot of comfort to people who, Google's guaranteeing they must be good. They've got these star ratings, etc. I think you'll like those a lot when they come.
It's kind of a clever play, I think, from Google, because it's, as much as we talk about mitigating and reducing your exposure to any one platform, they've kind of done it within their own platform. And so, everyone's like, what other paid avenues should we use? So we're not completely exposed, with our Google ads or whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden this comes out. It's like, wow, this is cool. It's like local. So it's kind of competing with a lot of these other, platforms out there that are, rank locally and all this, True Local or whatever it might be over there. I don't know, Rise Local, blah, 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 whatever they're called, and they're kind of jumping into that space, which I think is good.
Yeah, they're cutting out the middleman and just kind of saying, "Hey, you want to rank locally? Pay us." You're ranking locally for these leads.
Yep. Yeah, and then they get that little ecosystem that they've sort of got already, which is with your reviews and this and that and blah blah blah. Like it all kind of ties into a little machine that ideally works together.
It's kind of wild how Google focused you could be if you want to be. You could have your website hosted and created through Google. You could have your YouTube channel with your content. You could have your organic rankings, your regular text ads, your local service ads, your Google My Business listing. You can use Gmail as your email provider. Google is a monopoly in many ways of interest and search intent online, which has pros and cons for sure. And,
definitely, yeah. I mean, it's at that situation, has been for many years now, where like even just all the websites, they all look the same because they have to if you want it to show up in search. There's certain things that Google needs to identify, and all the websites look the same. Like everywhere you go, the websites all look the same. So for better or worse, yet to be defined. But it's I suppose that sort of speaks to what you were just saying then. If you want to play in that game, you kind of got to play by their rules to a degree.
Exactly. Yep. They control the access to your customer, and so you gotta optimize in the way that they have said that they want that access to be controlled.
So, what do you think the future looks like? I mean, maybe not long term, but even over the next couple of years in relation to this changing landscape. Like, I like to think that things are going to be steering towards. Well, I mean, we're specifically trade focused, so we only deal with trade businesses, and I love the local ad service side of things. I think it's revolutionary for us. It's basically been built specifically for us, which is great. But I'd love to see what your thoughts are in terms of what are the other things that you think might be changing or shifting looking forward.
What I think Google's going to keep doing is pushing towards automation as much as possible in every area of management and how they get you in front of people. We already see that with campaign types like Performance Max or local service ads, where there's relatively limited control that you have over who you show up for. You basically tell Google, "Hey, this is what I want," and then you got
Yeah.
to trust Google to get it. And so what I've seen is, over the years, I've been in this close to a decade at this point. So I've seen lots of different iterations, and there were plenty more iterations even before I jumped in. But we're no longer button pushers in many ways. It used to be a lot of what we did as Google Ads managers for clients is push this button, you do that bid optimization, touch that keyword there, et cetera, et cetera. Now, in strategy has always been important, but now strategy is really what is key. It's okay, what data are we feeding to Google? What decisions are we making from the data Google reports? What is the messaging of the offer that we're giving? Are we giving free quotes? Are we giving, what are we charging, et cetera? Like you said, geographically being smart about, hey, can we actually compete on this type of keyword, this type of search traffic, or do we need to niche down our actual product offering and figure something else out? And I think that strategy is never going to go away because the AI, the systems, they're really good at dealing with what you input and then exponentially working with that on the output side. So if you put in a bad strategy or bad data, they're going to be really good at spending your money very quickly and wasting it very well because they've got bad data they're working with. And so, yeah, I think strategically, that's where people like you, people like me can come in and put the right strategy in place and then leverage that AI, that push towards automation to do an even better job of those granular changes that historically, we would have been doing ourselves by clicking buttons here and there.
Mm. Yeah, it's definitely. I think those little. It's. I feel like it can be good and bad. Like sometimes you want to. I mean, in the past, we've given Google more rope, and they've come back and hung us with it. So we kind of want to take that back, but then, like you say, like in an ever-changing, fast-moving landscape, there comes a point where these little things. I mean, essentially, the algorithms should be able to, and probably can, effectively remove a lot of those things. I mean, progressively, if you went back and looked at running a Google ad campaign 10 or even 5 years ago, and what it looks like then to now, like it's very different. A lot of those things have sort of been, those issues have been eliminated.
It's massively different. And that's one of the things too we'll see often with businesses reaching out to us is they'll be saying, I don't understand why it's not working anymore. We did great for years in Google. We have it all dialed in, et cetera. But they haven't kept up with how things have changed. And they were doing great back when, Google was full of single keyword ad groups and you had bid adjustments to the wazoo and you had everything broken out by a billion different things, and now they just can't compete in a world where Google doesn't favor that, and Google favors the person using smart bidding and providing data about the quality of leads, etc. So you just gotta stay up with the times, or make sure your team is staying up with the times in order to remain competitive with Google these days.
So what do you think? I'd love to hear how you address the conversations around budget with clients and helping them understand the dynamic. I mean, the good thing about, I suppose, running paid campaigns is essentially it's an equation. Like you can I mean, this is how we look at it anyway. We can say, well, if you need this many leads, we need this many clicks, which means we need to be showing this many times, which means it's going to cost you this much, and you can kind of reverse engineer it to a degree.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear about how you got, what your take is on that.
We use a similar approach, which is figuring out what does the client actually want. So a lot of clients will come to us and will say, what budget do you recommend? What do we need to pay for traffic? And the question is, what do you need? What is your profit per job? Or how many jobs can you handle in a month? Work our way backward from there to figure out how to get profitability, and then what can we afford to pay for a lead based upon what's your conversion rate, for leads to come in. And a lot of businesses don't know that information initially because they're not tracking it, or maybe they're new and they don't yet have enough data to figure that out. And so sometimes you got to work with benchmarks or make assumptions.
And that's a really good point. And that's very often the case with a lot of clients we work for. We just say, we don't know until we get data in the system. What we can't tell you which direction we need to go, whether up budget, down budget, but we recommend this to start.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly. Yeah, we'll often do the same thing. Like they're like, "Oh, I don't know if our conversion rate's 5% or 50%." Well, it's going to make a big difference in success. So let's figure it out. What can you afford to invest, and is that enough to collect the data we need? Because that's the other flip side of things. If they've got, hey, we've got $500 a month we can spend. Well, if you're plumber going after Sydney or something, but we can get you a couple of clicks and then you're done, and you have no idea whether you can be successful or not, because it's just not enough data to figure out those conversion rates and numbers. And so sometimes we've got to say, hey, you know what? Google Ads is probably not the best fit for you. You don't have enough budget at this point in your company's life to invest into that. You need to explore, a different method, word of mouth, referral, local, whatever. But Google's too expensive. And then sometimes we say, hey, you know what? You've got the budget to invest. Great. Let's test it. Let's figure out how are we measuring success, and what does success look like to you as a client? What are the KPIs? And then go from there.
I think it's also a really good conversation to have with the client, and we utterly refuse today to run any paid traffic campaigns whatsoever unless we have the clients set up with lead capture and in the CRM system that we run. Mm-hmm. So reason being, we just you would have experienced it, I'm sure, as well. That whole mentality around churn and burn. We need more leads. We need more leads. We need more leads. And you go look at the database, and they've got thousands and thousands of contacts that they've never spoken to. They've never. It's insane, But talking about conversions and understanding for you listeners and viewers out there the importance of maximizing that lifetime value once you capture that lead, using it. It's not a churn and burn conversation, and it shouldn't be. You may not. We find in a lot of cases the client doesn't have a lead problem. They've just got a problem with capturing, nurturing, re-engagement, educating, which ties into an ecosystem which is not purely Google Ads. It's then all of a sudden, okay, well then how do we send out an email marketing campaign or a drip campaign, or how do we create a useful blog a month and send it out to our customers to keep them engaged, or whatever it is. There's a whole thing that expands off the back of it, where it's not just a conversation around lead generation.
Absolutely. That's where I think a lot of those bigger companies too, they can afford to spend as much as they're spending because they have those processes and systems nailed down, and they might be able to spend more than you per lead to get that lead in the door, because they have a much better process of turning that into revenue, turning that into a lifetime customer, and getting referrals from that customer and leveraging their review to get other customers, that whole ecosystem that you described there.
So for you guys out there that are sort of glazing over here, essentially what we're saying is there's your customer, whether you know it yet, whether you've defined it yet or not, there's a lifetime value on your existing customer as an aggregate, as an average, right? So understanding what that is puts you in a position where you may even be able to lose money on the initial project that you win from a client. So it might cost you $300 to win a $200 job, for example. However, over the course of 12 months, 24 months, whatever it might be, that client might be worth you, $3,000, $4,000, whatever it is. So you're well ahead. So there's understanding all those numbers is really important, especially for someone that's trying to run these campaigns, because if we can see, well, it's going to be expensive to run this, we need budget or whatever. And you guys are like, well, I've got that sort of budget. And you go, okay, cool. Well, we need to know those numbers. We need to figure those numbers out if we don't know them, So
100%.
And the other interesting thing that we see a lot is, we've got based on the different types of services that we do run campaigns for, there's a sales cycle advantage and disadvantage with different types of products, services, industries, verticals, whatever it might be. So if you're, for example, in the home renovation space, or, floor installations, or something that's more project based, you've got a longer sales cycle, or home building. People might come to you for information, and between the time they come to you and the time they actually pull the trigger and sign the contract, it could be 3 years. So that doesn't mean that you need to keep generating more and more and more leads all the time to churn and burn and mitigate the time with that 3-year time period. It just means that you've got to get more creative in nurturing that person from when they come to you to the point where they decide to pull the trigger. So that's the kind of conversations that you should be having with your marketing company. Okay, well, how do we generate these leads and make sure that they, by the time they're ready, we're still we're still in contact with them. We're still adding value.
Absolutely. A good marketing company too is going to be asking those types of questions, which is something that you as a business owner can use as a vetting tool when you're deciding who to work with, who to allow to steward your ad spend. Are they just saying, oh, what budget, and then we'll run with it? Or are they asking you about lifetime value, about cost per lead, conversion rates? That is an indicator that they actually are thinking through what's going to make you successful, and they're not just in the churn and business model themselves.
In a lot of cases that you will not know this is the business, and which is what John and I were saying before. You've got to get data. You've got to have data in the system so you can actually guide these conversations. You can actually steer the ship. And if it's new to you, then you won't have that data. But you got to find a way to collate it. But I mean, again, we're really, really solid on foundationally. We just won't do any sort of lead, especially paid lead generation, unless we have the foundations laid, which are going to capture all of those details, so the client can leverage that ecosystem, which might involve, sending out emails or sending out text campaigns or whatever the heck it is. It doesn't matter. The point is capture the contact, so that you're in a position that you can use it, not in a position that you wish you could.
Exactly. Yeah, couldn't agree with you more, Matt.
I should put that on a t-shirt. So, mate, what else do you want to cover off on?
I think we've hit some great points here. I would just say, I'm going to come back to the compliance side of things a little bit, just because that's top of mind right now for me, with so many businesses that are reaching out to us with issues. If you're running your own ads, or if you're having an agency run ads for you, be really aware of what Google's policies are, about what you can and can't advertise, about what you can and can't say, and about just kind of the technical side of things as well, making sure your website is staying up, making sure you're not blocking Google from scanning your website. We've got a client I was talking to this morning, and they've got problems because they're trying to block foreign traffic from their website, but they've accidentally blocked Google's bots as well. And now Google is penalizing them for that because Google thinks that they're trying to hide something. And so it's things like that are just honest mistakes, or things you wouldn't even think about in the context of advertising. You've got to have a good relationship with your marketing company, a good relationship with just understanding what's going on to try and mitigate those problems before you wake up and see that red banner of death in your account that says you're suspended. And now you don't know how long it will take, or if Google will ever give you back the ability to advertise on their platform. I've seen businesses go out of business while waiting for Google to get back to them, because that's where their business was coming from, and they could no longer get that traffic in the door. So just be aware.
And I would also like to add to that, just if you're going to do any of these things that we've been talking about, you need to be patient, and you need to understand that, like, it takes time to collate data, and it takes time to optimize data. And like John was saying before, it's not like a pull the trigger today and there's immediate wins tomorrow situation. It's a case of pulling the trigger today so that we can optimize for results down the track. And so it's really important that you give it the time that it needs in order to mature and for it to evolve into a better performing campaign. And in almost every instance that I've ever experienced, and it should be the case, where you start is always going to be the worst.
Yes, start from ground zero and build your foundation upon that.
Mate, this has been a great chat. We should maybe check in and have a bit more of a regular conversation around this every year or something, just to see what the landscape's looking like and how it's changed and how it's evolved. I think it's important that we sort of communicate out there to those listeners and viewers, what's going on out there in this space.
That'd be awesome. There's very little you can guarantee about Google, but I can guarantee a year from now it's going to look very different. So
yeah, death, taxes, and Google changing. Is that the three certainties in life? Great. Well, mate, thank you so much for your time today. Again, listeners, I'll put details over to John's website and things like that in the show notes. So head across to siteshed.com and search John Horn, Horn, and you will get access to all that stuff. John, thank you so much for your time, mate. I look forward to chatting to you in the future.
Thanks so much, Matt.
Big shout out to John from StubGroup for riffing on me with this topic. It's great to get some perspective from somebody that's in the same industry but in a different market. To get notified of our upcoming videos, hit that subscribe button and turn your notifications on. And please be sure to not only share this video with someone else, but also leave some of your comments and experiences down below. We'd love to hear them.